I wanted to make a quick tutorial about how to import wavetables onto the peak, and especially how to transfer wavetables from other softwares like VSTs to the peak, and that extends to how to create your own wavetables yourself using a VST and without using the Novation component software tools that are a little bit hard to use in my opinion unless you're very familiar with additive synthesis. So what I'm going to do today is showing you how to create your own wavetable and send them inside of the peak. So this video is heavily based off Star Skies Cars video on how to create wavetable for anything for free, except this one's a little bit different and adapted to the Novation peak because I feel like it's a tiny bit different, the logic, and there's some things that are mistaken inside of Novation's documentation of the peak at the moment of the making of this video. So let's go ahead and go inside the Novation components software and click on Manage Peak, although I want to add that this video also works for the Summit, of course. And if we go to Wavetable Editor, we're going to be able to get wavetables from the peak, but we can also create our own, and that's what we're interested in doing. The Upload Wavetable option is not interesting. I tried to use the SYX file format. I tried to look for information about how to use these files and how to create them, and I couldn't find enough information, and the manual way that I'm going to show you works every single time, and it's very robust, although it's a lot of handiwork and it can be a little bit tedious. But if you follow these steps carefully, you'll be able to make your own wavetables very easily for the peak and create sounds that are maybe not possible to do with the base wavetables from the peak or the base sine waves and saw waves, etc. So let's close that, and if we go to the Novation documentation about the peak online, I'll put a link to that in the description. If we scroll down, so that's components and the peak guide for Novation components. If I scroll down, there's a subsection called Wavetable Editor, and in there you get all of the relevant info to use the Wavetable Editor from Novation Components, which is great. But what we're interested in this section right there. So once a file is imported, you'll be shown the player where you can play back the sound and find the part of the file to import, whether either as a single waveform or a wavetable. As you click the scroll bar, you'll hear a sample of what the waveform at the point sounds like. So what we're going to be doing is that we're going to go inside of Ableton Live, and we're going to use Massive X, but you can use any VST that you want, but we'll be using Massive X as a VST to record a custom wavetable that we'll be sending to Novation components. And there's this very specific way to do this, and that is through recording the sound out of Massive X and processing it so Novation components understands exactly what we want to output and what we want to send to the peak. So let's go inside of Ableton here. I have Massive X loaded. And a very basic note, which is, I think, just a simple C1 note in a clip. And I have automated the position of the wavetable inside of Massive X. So if I open Massive X, of course, you can do that with any VST. And I just play back my sample here. I've chosen the Normand wavetable from Massive X, and I'm scrolling through the wavetable position using an automation inside of Ableton Live. All right, so now that I have this, I want to record it, so let's go to options and settings, because I want to show you something. My DAW right now is in 48,000 Hertz, and that is important because Novation Components expects a 44,100 Hertz wave file, which means that if you try to output a WAV file from Ableton, process it in Audacity, as we're going to do later, and then import it inside of Novation Components, you're gonna have a little bit of an extra wave cycle that you, of course, don't want inside of the Wavetable editor. Speaking of that, if I want to show you a little bit what we have inside the creation tools of Novation Components, let's click Create Wavetable. And this is what we get, and we're gonna ignore all of that. There is a cool Novation video on how to use this. What I want to show you is specifically the import audio file option. If we go in there, we're gonna be prompted to choose a WAV file, and if I choose this WAV file, I have two options: either import a waveform or import a wavetable. This imports the 5 slices of our wavetable at once. Okay, so this is much faster than importing a single waveform 5 times. So we're going to use this function right there, and in order to understand what Novation Components wants us to import inside of the software, we're going to have to go to the documentation here. And Novation tells us that in order to import a full wavetable, we need 2,560 cycles. So they're mistaken here. They made quite a big mistake. It's not cycles, it's samples, which means that we're gonna have to do some math, simple math, to understand what we actually need to output in our wave file in order to get 512 times 5. Because we want 512 single what we want is 5 single waveforms here, and one single waveform is made of 512 samples. Okay, so now we have two very important informations. We know that Novation Components requires a wave file that is in 44,100 Hertz sample rate, and we also know that a single waveform needs to be 512 samples, not cycles. One cycle, which is one waveform, needs to be 512 samples. So the full wavetable, which is 5 waveforms, needs to be 5 times 512 samples, so 2,560 samples. This is the final length of our audio file. But here's the tricky part. How do we know how to create a waveform that is exactly this length? Because a lower note is going to be a longer note, a longer period, and a shorter note, a higher pitch, is going to be a much shorter waveform, a much shorter period. So in order to calculate that, we're going to need to go to our calculator here, and we're going to do 44,100 Hertz divided by 512, and that's going to give us 86.13, and that result is the frequency in Hertz of the note that we need to play in our DAW in order to get the exact wavelength for our wave file. Okay, so what note is this? Well, luckily We have a very cool tool that is Pitch to Frequency Calculator. It's an online tool that allows you to see exactly what this note is. So if I copy paste that in there, you see that I can get the frequency in here. I can put the frequency, and 440 hertz is equal to A of the 4th octave. So that's cool. Let's paste our result in here and press enter. And the results that we get is that we know that we need to play an F note on the 2nd octave, pitched down 23 cents in order to get this exact frequency. So that's very, very valuable information. All we have to do now is go back into live, and we're gonna get Ableton ready to record. So let me delete that track. I'm gonna add it back just so you see what I'm doing. I'm gonna arm it for record, and the audio is gonna be directly from Massive X. One thing that we need to adjust now is go inside of Massive, and inside of the routing tab, we want to make sure the oscillator is plugged directly to the output. We don't want any of the internal math of Massive to be interfering with our signal. So this is the cleanest way to do it. Inside of the voice, you can also, inside of the envelopes, you can make sure to have the attack as short as possible and the sustain all the way up here. Cool. So what we need to do now in order to get the exact pitch is that we're gonna play inside of our clip here. If I bring up the notes, let's close Massive for now. I take this note, and this note needs to be an F2. But how do we pitch down minus 23 cents? We're going to do it inside of Massive X, inside our parameters, and we're going to pitch down our oscillator minus 23 cents. There we go. All we have to do now is press record. And I'm going to cut this clip right there, so I know it's exactly 2 seconds because I'm in 120 BPM. And there we go. So now I can press Ctrl J to consolidate this, and I'm going to disable the warp here. I'm going to I can notice here that consolidating clips in Ableton already normalizes the samples, which is pretty convenient. And this sample I'm gonna locate inside of my browser first. So here it is. I'm gonna rename it. Let's call it there we go. So now I can take my sample and drag and drop it inside of Audacity, which is a free software, and I'm gonna put the link in the description to download it. And so inside of Audacity now, it's very important that you check the project rate. Right now it's in 40,000. We're gonna switch. Now is the time to switch to 44,100 hertz. Then we're gonna enable snap to nearest, and these need to be set in samples because we're working in samples and not seconds. Here is our full audio file. It's 2 seconds long, and we know that we want to actually sample waveforms in the beginning, in 1/4, in the middle, 3/4, and in the end of our waveform, because that's where the 5 positions that we want to sample in order to send them to the Novation component software. So if I select a zone inside of Audacity, I can Ctrl E to zoom in, and then I can select a part of my waveform that is going from 0 to the next 0 here. And what I can see, and that's the kind of like another mistake that Novation made on their documentation, is that at the time of this video, of course, is that I'm noticing that a single waveform is actually 256 samples, which is half of 512 that was advertised on the website, which gives us a little bit less accuracy in the sampling process. So maybe Novation will be working on that in the future. But in the meantime, this is what we're going to work with. So here, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to zoom in as until the point that I start to actually see the samples. And I'm going to select from this sample that is crossing the section here. And instead of like dragging this like so, I'm just going to click on that sample here. I'm clicking on that sample and I'm using this section right there to tell Audacity that I want a 256 sample length. And there we go. I have a perfect wave form that I can copy with Ctrl-C and paste to the next track, like so. So I have my first wave form. Now I can zoom out, go to the first quarter of the waveform. Same, I'm going to zoom in, and then I'm going to select another section. But here it's important as well to understand that I cannot pick any place. I cannot like pick here or pick here or pick here blindly. What I want to do is actually be a little bit more generous, and I'm going to Ctrl-C that, and I'm going to Ctrl-V it below on my other track, and I'm going to do the same for 1 second here. I'm going to take a couple of samples here around 1 second, Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, and the same here, there we go, Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, and same at the end, Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V. All right, I'm going to put them a little bit closer to each other. Can zoom in. Okay, select, Ctrl-E to zoom. And a very important step here is to analyze and try to understand how one shape morphs into the other. Because if I take the beginning of the waveform here until here, well, it might not be the best way to morph. Like, for instance, if I take from here to here, it might create some phasing issues while morphing from the first position to the second position of the wavetable, because the transformation from this waveform to that waveform might be too drastic. So the waveform that looks the most like this one in here is actually this. From what I understand, this peak is gonna grow into this peak. This little oscillation there is gonna oscillate more into this one, and this peak is gonna narrow down into this. And same for the down peak here. So this is perfect. So I can just move in, select my first sample, 256 samples, please, and then I can Ctrl-C, get rid of that, delete, click here, Ctrl-V, and paste that. Just make sure it's nice and tight here. Do the same for the third one. So let's try to see what would be morphing in what here. And you kind of have to use your intuition to find the best. It's not always easy because, like, you know, it could be this, it could be that, but this seems to be this. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna do it like this. I'm gonna consider that this peak morphs into this one, and then this thing morphs into this right there. And we're gonna hope for the best and see if we're gonna get phase issues. And of course I can come back later and fix that if I need to. So let's select this sample, 256, that's already the right length. Control C, get rid of that. Control V. Make sure it's nice and tight there. Same thing for the third. So what I'm starting to understand here is that what I'm seeing here is the tail of that initial kick, that initial sample, and we can see it clearly here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna revert my work and consider that this is actually the beginning of the sample. I'll make that real quick and I'll be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and selected all of my samples here. They're all 256 samples long. Actually, there's one sample missing, but it's not too bad. I can live with that. So let's just select the first one and extend the selection to 5 times 256, which is 1280. There we go. And then what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna delete this track just for good measure. Press File, Export Selected Audio, and I'm gonna overwrite this existing one. Press OK. Then go to Novation Components, Import Audio File. I don't know why there's a second one, but let's pick this one. And select Import Wavetable. And there we go. Now we have a perfect wavetable imported inside of Novation Components. All there's left to do is save. Call it Normand. Press Save. And then I can send it to the peak on my, let's say, the third wavetable, maybe the fourth one. I think the third is in use already. So fourth one, there we go. Now, in order to test it, let's go back to live. I've loaded an external instrument leading to my peak in there, so I can now play it. I'm gonna initialize a patch on the peak. There we go. And now in the first oscillator section, of course, the wave type needs to be set to more, and then you can select all the way to the right your custom Normand wavetable that you just imported, and you can start to play it. And I'm sweeping through the wavetable using the shape amount set to manual mode, and I can pitch it down, give it a little bit of chorus maybe, a little bit of reverb, why not a little bit of delay. So there we go. I hope this video was useful, and I will see you in the next one.